So in this tutorial, what I'd like to demonstrate to you is how to use two key aspects of Pages for the Mac to make your scientific paper easier to manage. If you're looking for the actual idea of what the content should be for your scientific paper or anything like that, I encourage you to go to my website, and on the lab section of the website where you normally get your lab manual, there should be a link in the nav bar under lab or in the side panel right underneath where we have campuses listed for review sessions. There should be one of those tabs that's labeled scientific paper, and if you click on it, it's going to take you to a page that has a multitude of different resources that'll give you a better idea in regards to what your scientific paper should be about and how it should be written. What I want to show you here, though, is how you can make it look in accordance to whatever your instructor assigned you in terms of the relative styles. So I want to preface this by saying that I require slightly different styling on my scientific papers compared to other instructors, so please consult your syllabus or the handout your instructor gave you in regards to the scientific paper. That being said, the techniques I'm going to show you can be applied to whatever style your instructor tells you need to utilize. Okay, so as you may have seen, the scientific paper is going to be divided into several sections. So here we've got abstract. This is the abstract section. Let's do introduction. I'm going to copy and paste this because it'll be easier. This is the intro section. Let's do materials and methods. M section. And then I know that it's going to go to results and discussions after this, so there'll be a discussion section following the results section. But I'm only going to do these 4 sections for now, just to give me enough to play around with, but not so much that I'm kind of going crazy, okay? So, for those of you who are familiar with Pages, you'll know that rather than having everything condensed into this entire top bar like Word does, Pages has this formatting palette here on the right-hand side. So you can just click on the paintbrush, and there's your formatting palette. So, I don't know about you, but when I was in college and I had to write a paper, this is how essentially I would go about dividing it into these different sections. I'd say, okay, I've got the abstract here, and so let's say all of my headings need to be, for my class, my students have to do them as Times New Roman, so I'd have to come down here and find Times New Roman, and I'd say, okay, there's Times New Roman, it has to be size 14, and it has to be bold. Okay, so that's what I want each one to look like. And then I would go to the introduction header, and I'd do the same thing. Okay, got to go back down here, the Times New Roman, or up to the top, the Times New Roman, 14, bold. And it's, as you can see, it's fairly cumbersome, and the same is true in Word. It can get really, really cumbersome. So I want to teach you a really cool technique that's going to make it super easy for you to edit all of these different sections to be you know, Times New Roman, size 14, and bold. Or if you need it to be something different, that's fine. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to say we have a header for our scientific paper that we want to have that is size 14 font, Times New Roman for the font family, and bold. And these all need to be that size, that weight, and that font family. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select abstract. And you'll notice over here in the formatting palette, it has body with an asterisk next to it, and essentially it says, okay, I can update this. And what this really is this is what we call the style for this particular element. It started as body, and I've updated it by enlarging the font size, changing the font family, and making the font weight bold. Now, I don't want this to be body, I want it to be something else. So if I click on this down arrow here, it brings up all of the styles that are currently listed for this document. We've got titles, subtitles, headings. Heading sounds like it might actually fit this. So if I click heading, the problem is that it changes it to what that format was for that heading, and that's not what I'm wanting to do here. So I'm going to Command Z back so that I go back to the way it was. So let's say that we want to update our heading here. Okay, so I want this heading to, instead of being Arial and bold and this size, I want it to actually be Times New Roman, and I want it to match this. So heading, I can redefine this from the selection. So if I want my heading to be just like this, then I can just choose redefine from selection. Now, something to note about styles. The styles that I create here and generate are going to be exclusive to this document, which means if you open up a brand new document, all of these styles are going to be reset. So if you want to, what you can do is you can actually go through a document, define the styles, and then name that document something and have it act essentially as a template for any future document you would write. Okay? Now let's say I don't want to mess with the heading. So I can redefine this heading from the selection if I want to. Okay, so there it is. So you'll notice the heading changed. Command Z, and I'm going to go back so that it's back to the way it was. Let's say instead of changing up the existing heading, I want to instead create a brand new style from this. Well, all I have to do with abstract selected is click on the down arrow and click the plus here, and I'm going to create a new style. So let's say I want to call this scientific paper section heading. Or if you want it to be shorter, let's just call it section heading. That lets me know this is what I'm going to use to start a new section. So now I've defined abstract as section heading. Now that might not sound that impressive, but let me show you the benefit of defining styles. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this and drag it up here so it'll be a little higher in this so that I can always easily access it. I'm actually going to go to above subtitle and I'm going to put it here. And what we'll find is we can actually delete styles if we want to as well to make this formatting palette cleaner with only the styles we want to employ. Okay, so I've got this set to section heading. So I'm going to go here to introduction, and you'll notice introduction is still set to body. So what I can do is I can click on introduction, and I can go here to section heading, and I can click it. And it doesn't change any of the formatting with intro because we had it already formatted the same way as the abstract. So that might not seem very impressive. But let's see what happens now when I go to materials and methods, and I click on the down arrow and I choose section heading. And it's worth mentioning, the cool part about styles is you do not have to highlight the whole set of words. All that's required is you be on the same line as the text you want to format. So if I want to format materials and methods to be just like my other section headings, I just have to make sure the cursor is somewhere on this line. It can be between the letters, it could be in a space, it could be at the end or the beginning, as long as it's on the same line. So here it is. I'm going to click this and I'm going to choose section heading. And voila, it changes materials and methods to match that. I can do the same thing for results. The caveat is, what this ultimately means is that if you use styles and you have a bunch of different text on a single line and you want part of the text to be bold and the other part to not be bold, if you choose section heading, it is going to make all of the text bold. If you update section heading so it's not bold, all of the text is going to be changed to where it's not bold. These styles apply to an entire line of text. So the only way I can make non-bold come after abstract is if I go in and actively change this to be non-bold. But the second I go here, if I update the section heading or if I just click on section heading, it's going to change it back to being bold. Okay? Now, let's talk about another benefit of this. Let's say that you're typing along in your paper and you did make all of these size 14 font, just as I said. But let's say you did that off of this tutorial and now all of a sudden your instructor has said, no, your heading, your section headings have to be size 16 font. You're like, oh man, I'm going to have to go back through and I'm going to have to change abstract, introduction, materials and methods, all of that to 16-point font. Well, here we find another advantage of using styles. I'm going to click on abstract and I am going to change it to 16-point font. Now you'll notice none of the other headings changed, just abstract did. But over here, I have this asterisk along with update. If I click update, all of my other headings are now going to change to match that. Because essentially what we're saying is the style for section heading now is 16-point font. And since we had defined all of these guys as a section heading, they're going to all change to 16-point font. Now notice if I come down here and I type in discussion and I change this to bold, I change it to 16-point font, and I change it to Times New Roman, Okay, that looks like all of these section headings, but again, let's say now you realized, oh wait, it does need to be 14 size font. So I'm going to change results back to 14 size font. Again, it says update, and when I click it, it updates these four, but notice nothing happened to discussion. And the thing I forgot to do was I forgot to define discussion as a section heading. So when I do that now, it changes it down to the appropriate size font. So now any changes I make in results or any other section heading and I update, discussion now is also updated. Okay, now it's not only going to apply to section headings. I can go ahead and copy my result. Let's do the abstract. I'll build out the abstract here just by copying and pasting this sentence a bunch of times. I know all work and no play makes Professor Garcia a dull boy. Oh, sorry, I pulled up Spotlight there on accident. Okay. So this is my body for my paper. Let's say I want to actually call this section body, okay? But I don't want it to be in Helvetica font, so I can update this. So I redefined it just as we had before by clicking New Style and defining section body. Now I'm defining section body 1 here, which I don't want, so I can go ahead and delete that. But essentially, let's say, okay, so it's going to ask me now, what do I want to change it to? If I'm going to delete that style, I need to define a new style, so I'm going to choose section body and say okay. So I deleted section body 1, and that's now back down to section body. So if you try and delete one of these styles that you're using, it's going to ask you to redefine all of that text that you have for that style to one of the other existing styles. All right, but I digress. So I've got my section body, and I want to update it again, so this needs to be Times New Roman. Okay, so I'm going to go to Times New Roman. There we go. And I'm going to increase this to size 12. And let's say that it needs to be double spaced. So I'm going to say double spacing. And I'm now going to choose to update section body. All right, so I'm going to come over here just to show you that this is maintained. I'm going to again, sorry, I keep pulling up Spotlight because I keep trying to press space in addition to pasting. There we go. Okay. So I'm building out my intro to have several paragraphs, okay? And I want these paragraphs to be the section body. So I can highlight both paragraphs, and I'm going to choose section body. And that is going to format those. Now let me show you what would have happened if instead I had just chosen a single paragraph. So a single line, when I say single line, what I really mean is we haven't pressed the enter button. So the second you press the enter button, basically what you're telling Pages is start a new paragraph. So really I should say that these styles don't apply to a single line, they apply to a single graph here to match my section body style. So when I do that, this paragraph updates, but the second paragraph does not. So if I need to update both of the paragraphs, I can either highlight them or I can just go anywhere in either of the paragraphs and say this is how it needs to be defined. So I now have my introduction section where I set forth. Okay, so those are styles. Now let's say that an instructor also tells you that in addition to having these particular styles, he or she wants you to start each section on a new page. So that means the introduction and abstract can't be on the same page. This isn't how I do it for my students. My students could have their papers looking something similar to this and they would be fine. That is, abstract ends, there's a line space between abstract and intro, and then we start our introduction. Okay? But let's say your instructor doesn't want you to do something like this. So what a lot of students do is something similar to what I used to do. They say, okay, well I got to start a new page for my intro, so here we go. Enter, 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 all the way down. And they keep doing that until eventually they get to a new page. And what that does is it basically creates a bunch of brand new paragraphs after your abstract leading to your intro. Let me show you why this is a problem, and many of you have probably encountered this particular issue. So I'm going to copy these lines from my abstract and paste. And let's see what happens to my introduction. So notice that my intro got pushed down. That's a problem because now I'm going to have to remember to come back in here and reformat my introduction. The other thing is true if, say, I decide I want to take out a bunch of content from my abstract. So let's say I delete everything up to this point in my abstract. Well, my introduction got pulled up onto the same page as my abstract. So if I delete sentences, now it's bringing my introduction up, and that's a problem too. So putting a bunch of paragraphs in here does not work. It doesn't allow you to be flexible if you decide to add or take away text from a certain section preceding the introduction section in this case. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to insert something called a page break. And what that's going to say is everything after this page break insert is going to go to a brand new page. So to do that, you can either click here and choose page break, or you can come up to the menu here and also choose page break. It's completely up to you. So I'm going to do insert page break. And so now what you'll notice is that did the same thing that I had done before with those paragraphs. But let me show you the big difference here. So I'm going to now paste in a bunch of text to lengthen my abstract, just like I was deciding to add new stuff to my abstract. So let's look at what happens to my intro. Nothing. It stays in the exact same place where it was before. And so I can also now delete all of my abstract up to a single sentence, and my intro remains in the same place. So the benefit of this is it makes it super easy for me to make adjustments to one section and not have to worry about the other sections moving their placement in regards to that section. So if I needed to put materials and methods on its own page, let me go ahead and delete this line here. I can go ahead and do insert page break, and boom, materials and methods are also on their own page. Okay. So this is super useful for this particular paper. Now I know that these are technically sections, and you'll notice that there is something called a section break as well, which will work in a similar fashion to page break, except it will divide your paper, if we go to the page thumbnails here, into sections. So right now, this is actually treating my whole paper as an entire section. Typically, section breaks, in my experience, have been beneficial if you're writing a legitimate textbook in pages and you're trying to divide chapters into different sections. This essentially would be the Chapter 1 landing page, followed by all the pages in Chapter 1, and I would start a new section for Chapter 2. For your scientific paper, I think page breaks are probably fine, because here you're going to have your title page, and then the rest of this is going to represent the parts of your scientific paper. Okay? So we're going to use page breaks, not section breaks. Okay? So that's the benefit of using styles and page breaks in your scientific paper. It makes it incredibly easy to edit sections of your paper and have those changes reflected in all of the sections, and it makes it incredibly easy to divide your paper up into the distinct sections, and to ensure that those sections aren't bleeding back into the other sections if your instructor requires you to put your abstract and your intro on new pages. So start playing around with page breaks, get comfortable with them, get comfortable with styles, and you can really start better defining the different styles you're going to use for your paper and make it so much easier and quicker for you to edit parts of your paper. So that's all I have to say about page breaks and styles. Good luck, and I hope your paper goes well.